who's Associate Professor from the Department of Healthcare Information and Management in Minchuan University. So when you're ready.
Okay, thank you for coming. Actually, I'm the second presenter in this session because the first one hasn't arrived yet. So
here, just arrived.
Okay, but since I'm already here, so I'll proceed my presentation. And as you can see, this is a research about the political budget cycles, and we want to see if this kind of cycles can indicate a politician's competence. Let's see, the first question you may have is maybe you heard about the political business cycle and rather than the political budget cycle. But the difference between these two cycles is for business cycle, you just try to use the indicators like inflation rate and growth rate and some, things like that. But political budget cycle is more than this kind of economic indicators. It's, they use the government budget, you know, the fiscal budget and the revenue and things like that. And so it's more directly to the government's fiscal policy. So when we talk about political budget cycle, it's, we talk about this government intentionally raise the budget. I mean, say like budget deficit just before election, try to make himself look better, you know, to build more roads and better facilities, something like that. So this is just a clarification about business cycle and the budget cycle. And we will certainly focus on the second one. And the main argument and the main motivation for political budget cycle, of course, is the economic jargon is rational political budget cycle argument. So it says that if you are a competent government because your ability is very good to govern, so if you can raise the budget cycle, and then the incompetent government cannot because their ability is low, you know, the ability says producing public goods, things like that, and then the voters can use this budget cycle to rationalize their voting behavior. That means when we observe political budget cycle, then we know that the incumbent government is actually a competent one, so you want to re-elect them. Oh, okay, so this is a rational political budget cycle argument. And so naturally the question is, if that's true, can we have an incompetent government raise political budget cycles? If that's true, then when we observe a political budget cycle, then we don't know if this government is a competent one or incompetent one. So if the answer is yes, then under what conditions will we have this kind of anomalies from the rational political budget cycle argument? So for the past literature, I'll just go through it very quickly. And the first one is the rational budget cycle, political budget cycle literature. The first one is Rogoff. It's the things I'm talking about. You can distinguish government's competence by observing political budget cycle. The second one by Streb is he rather talk about the opportunism of the government, and so you can observe you can distinguish the opportunism of the government by observing political budget cycle. And the more thing about it is, more scholar talk about the theoretical stuff about the budget cycle is, you know, sometimes you can have a separation of powers, you can mitigate the budget cycle, and the other thing is you can have some kind of better reputation. If the candidate has better reputation, then you can mitigate the budget cycle. And of course, if you have imperfect observability, then the budget cycle is going to be severe because you cannot observe it perfectly. And other than the theoretical literature, we have many literature try to test the rational BBC argument by using data. And so mainly there are three kinds of target. The first one is, do we have a political budget cycle? So some people, by looking at the countries, specific countries, some people use the world data. So the answer is mixed. Some people find yes, some people find no. And then the second one is the size of the political budget cycle. So they try to find a reason for the political budget cycle to be big or small. And the third one is look at the effectiveness of the PBC. Mainly that you can use the PBC to indicate your competent type. Okay, so this is a much interesting one. The first one is Brander and Drayson. They find that if you use the PBC, try to indicate you are a competence one, and actually find it's bad. The voters is going to know that this is not a good thing. But for the other one in 2010, they find in Colombia, it's actually true. When people overspending, I mean the government overspending, it means they are competent. And then it's very effective. People are going to vote for you. Okay, so our purpose and the question is we try to find institutional factors to make to see if what kind of institutional factors is going to make PBC more effective or less so, and the timing for the competent and incompetent government to raise PBCs. So this is kind of try to compensate the existing literature, and so we have some preliminary result. It says that a competent incumbent is going to create PBC if the regime is stable and less transparent. And if incompetent incumbent produces the PBC, then the regime is less stable and also less transparent. So you can see that the result shows that we need less transparent regime and to have a PBC. But for which type of the incumbent is going to raise the PBC is going to be rely on the stableness of the regime. Okay, so let me go to the theoretical model a little bit. It's just a timing. So we have a three-stage game, and the first one is ordinary period. That means the incumbent just choose a G and tau. G is the public good level, and tau is the tax rate. And the second one is the election period. So after the election period, people vote. So in this period, the incumbent is going to choose government, the public good level and the tax rate, and also determine a debt level, B. So you can use the debt to finance your public good producing. And then after the election, the winner is going to choose G and tau again, and then fully repay the debt. And here we want to emphasize that even though we just assume that they are going to fully repay the debt before after the election, but the result is going to hold if you just repay a little bit. You don't need to repay them all. It's just for simplicity to try to work the model better. And then we have a complementary lemma, says that if you are high type, that means you are competent government, you are going to have a higher public good level and lower tax level. Okay, so we just jump to the equilibrium, and then we can see very clearly that this delta means the discount rate. So the discount rate has to be higher than something. Of course, this thing is less than 1. And then we are going to have a separating equilibrium. That means we can separate the incumbent one and the competent one. Okay. So you need to have a very patient incumbent in order to make this thing work. So this is kind of give us a pre-thought that we need to have a very stable regime in order to have this one, because if the regime is stable, then you can be patient enough. If the regime is not stable, it means maybe the military is going to take over the government, in the near future or something. It's a very high probability of that. Then I don't think you are going to be patient. Okay, so, and the second one is the W. That means the office rent. Okay, so if the office is attractive enough, the separation has to be created by raising PVC. That means if we have a very high office rent, then the low ability, that means the incompetent incumbent candidate wants to be in the office, so they try to mimic you. So for the competent government, it has to raise a very high PVC in order to prevent this thing from happening. Okay, so let's see the summary and okay, so let's just focus on this one, and you can see here we have for the high type incumbent, they are going to have a high public good level and a lower tax level, and for the star means the optimal one, so you have a higher and a lower. So this is a budget cycle. And then you can see for the low type one, when will he has a budget cycle is here. So you can see that it actually mimic the high type public good level and the tax level. And so you can see here, that means we are very stable and not very transparent. OA, that means office attractiveness. And here, not very stable, but also office is very attractive. Okay, so this is basically our finding theoretically. And then follow this, we will have our empirical studies. And this is our model. Com means competence, and we have literacy and infant mortality rate and all this kind of indicators to indicate the competence of the government. And vote means do we have election this year? If yes, then we have 1, and no is 0. And so this is a cross term, and this is the budget balance. Okay, budget balance, that means the government revenue minus government expenditure. Okay, so here the interesting part is what's in this omega. Okay, so this is our institutional factors. So we have transparency, the regime's transparency, and political stability, and also population. Okay, so this is our. It's very important to have this in our empirical model, and then let's see the result. Okay, so let's see, this is our main data set, and then we find that the first one, the first column, we see that there's actually a budget cycle. That means whenever you have an election that year, your budget, that means the revenue minus expenditure decrease. Okay, so it's deficit. And you can see a second column, they actually use the competence to combine with the vote. And then you can see that, yes, if you are more competent, you are going to increase the budget deficit in the election year. Okay? And the third column, you can see that the large population is going to mitigate the budget cycle created by competence government. The reason is, for more people in this regime, then you can much more easier to share the cost with your large population. And the fourth one is the transparency. You can see it's like the theoretical prediction. We have a transparency that mitigates the political budget cycle raised by competent incumbent. And the fifth one is the political stability. It's actually exacerbate the political budget cycle. Just like we said that you are going to be more stable, that means more patient, in order to have the competence one to raise the budget cycle. And last one is we just use our data to just focus on the less political stability country, and then we find what? You can focus on this too, and we can see that for the last political stability country, in our in our theoretical prediction, we predict that the low competent one is going to create political budget cycle. Indeed. Okay, indeed. Okay, let's just conclude. Okay, so this is research, and we have found that the political budget cycle relies on the institutional factors, especially the transparency, political stability, and the population. And our results show that this rational PBC argument is only useful in some countries, not all. Okay, and of course, for the country who satisfy rational PBC argument, it has to depend on the transparency, political stability, and population. And then it will be very interesting to see that if different regulations on government debt may affect PBC. Okay, so this is our future step. I'll spend like 10 seconds to link our research to because this conference is about e-society, so I just spent 10 seconds to link it. Let me see. Bear with me a little moment. Okay. So this omega, I say that we include transparency index in it. In transparency, we actually use a couple of indicators to form the transparency index. One is the internet usage, and the other is cell phone usage. So I guess that's very close to our E definition in this workshop. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Because I have only 8 minutes, so I will make my comments very brief. First of all, I'd like to thank the conference for inviting me to discuss Professor Chang and colleagues' excellent paper. I'm not an expert on political economy or formal theory, and I'm sure that the authors have checked all the proofs and made sure that all the mathematics right. So I'm not going to go into the details about the equilibrium or strategy profiles. And my comments, therefore, will be based on the perspective of electoral politics, because I learned a lot of voting behavior and electoral politics. So I hope my comments could be helpful for the authors. Okay, and so this paper is about fiscal policy conditional on 3 factors or parameters of institutions. The first one is competence measured by voters' overall knowledge or awareness. And then the second one is transparency measured by information access for the mass public, which is mentioned by Professor Kong about internet or cell phone usage. And the third one is political stability measured by some government index. So based on those parameters or institutional factors, the authors try to argue that the incumbent government will create political budget cycle of spending money more than needed in the election period, if I understand that correct. So if the regime is stable, even though it's not transparent, the incumbent government may try to spend more money and may raise some debts. Thank you. So, but if the regime is transparent, they also argue that the incumbent will have no incentive to create PBC because of the smaller benefit of winning the position. So I think the argument can be summarized like that. So my first comment would be that the authors may want to clarify the linkage between transparency and the administrative benefit. is it possible to measure the administrative benefit by the government system? Because the authors argue that if the benefit is small, which is denoted by W, then the incumbent government or the challenger will not have very big incentive to create expansionary fiscal policy. So, but I'm not sure how to measure the benefit. And I think the authors try to argue that transparency is kind of like a positive of benefit. So if the country is transparent, then the benefit is small. But I wonder if they can consider the government system. So to my knowledge, the parliamentary system may have smaller benefit than the presidential system because the term is not fixed. So they can be challenged by the opposition party anytime. And in the parliamentary system, they are likely to be multi-party system. So maybe the office for the incumbent is not so the benefit is not so big to create PDC. And my second comment is that the authors assume voters are rational. So voters choose parties based on their short-term self-interest. However, voters could be rational in retrospective sense. They may check the incumbent's record and they decide whether or not the incumbent should stay in the office. And I think that's why the variable of competence has negative influence on the dependent variable, which is the PDC. And so I think when voters are aware of the consequence of the expansionary fiscal policies, the incumbent may hesitate to differentiate themselves from the challenger in raising debt and repaying if elected. I think if the incumbent government knows that the voters doesn't like raising debt, the idea of raising debt or create too much deficit, and then the incumbent government may do something else to divert the attention to tax rate or to other policies. Okay, so I think the authors can think about that. And one more minor question would be the measurement of the stability of government. I think the authors use some government index but they don't really, but they didn't really tell us why they have to use this index, or they didn't show the distribution of the index. They just tell us that okay, some countries rated the least stable one, and the other country, I think Luxembourg, right, is ranked the most stable regime. But I'm not quite satisfied with this argument or the index. Furthermore, if the authors can provide some graphics to illustrate the results, I think they will be it will be helpful and very easy to understand. Having said that, the paper has a lot of theoretical and empirical implications for scholars interested in fiscal policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much.